We have news for you. There is an exciting project on the way for a documentary on Qineng Qigong. Not only is Jeremy College a well-known Qineng Qigong teacher, he also has a successful background in producing for his own channel. This man is serious. Let's hear his plans and what he has achieved already. My name is Thorsten Lüdecke and this is the Wisdom Qigong podcast. So welcome everyone. Today I've got Jeremy College with me. Jeremy is well known in the community as a Qineng Qigong teacher. He's been around for, 15 years or something as a teacher, maybe, Jeremy?
More, 25.
More, 25 years. But today I've got him with me for a very different reason, because he approached me and said, look, Thorsten, I would like to do a documentary about Qineng Qigong because there is nothing like it produced in the West about what actually happened in the Huaxia Center and how the healing works today. And I said, well, Jeremy, what are your credentials? And he said, well, I started something called Positive TV, and it was long before YouTube even existed. And we had a huge following, like 250,000 views a month. And we interviewed people like the Dalai Lama and presidents of countries. And I thought, wow, this guy is serious. So let's hear what he has to say about the documentary plans. And Jeremy, maybe you would like to give us an idea of what you've got in mind there.
Wow, yes. Well, thank you for the introduction, Thorsten. That's great. What do I have in mind? It all came about. I was sitting with one of our teachers, Teacher Lou, in a wonderful retreat. And the retreat, maybe there were 20 or 30 people there. I was looking around and I was thinking, gosh, this is priceless material. How can it be possible that only 20 or 30 people are hearing this, when I feel like it's life-changing? And so I think I must have been looking a bit glum. And one of my students said to me, why the long face? And I said to her, well, I think it's such quality material. It's such a shame that we don't have many, many more people listening and, learning about Qineng Qigong. And she just said to me, what do you want to do about it? And I said, I think we need a documentary. And that's how it came about. So as you say, I'd had this background with Positive TV, just as an idea. A next door neighbor and I had talked about the state of world news. And from that had been born a TV channel, which eventually became, as you say, a YouTube TV channel. We were hoping we would eventually get onto a satellite channel. But then somebody mentioned to us that it was only £250,000 a month or something like that. So we kind of quashed that idea and went onto YouTube. But yes, we had some really, really extraordinary interviews with amazing people. And so along the way, I taught myself to interview. I taught myself to edit. I taught myself how to be a sound man. So I have the kind of the credibility, the background tools to make a documentary. And that was how this whole project began. We put a little bit of funding behind it. We visited China a couple of times. We've shot quite a lot of footage. And now we have a website. And that website has got our short trailer and our long trailer, one that's 3 minutes and one that's 10 minutes, a bit of information about who we are. And the project is sitting ready to go.
So you're not just coming up here and saying, look, I've got a good idea, because many people have good ideas and they never bring it to life. You've actually started already and you've done your research. You went to China, you created some footage. Like, this is the starting point. So now you're just saying, okay, I want to make this bigger. I want to make more of an impact, and I want to, add more content to it, and then hopefully get it out to a huge audience worldwide, because everybody deserves to know about what's happening with Qineng Qigong, right?
Exactly. I absolutely believe that. And this is a great juncture just to stop and say thank you to the Zhejiang Qigong Student Hub. I think you've done an amazing piece of work here. My colleague John Miller and I tried to do exactly what you've done several times and never managed to get it. I think in the Zhejiang Qigong world, trying to bring people together is a bit like herding cats. So you've done a very credible thing to make that happen. We thought that the idea was of spreading the word was really, really important. I come across it again and again, and I'm sure everybody in the Zhejiang Qigong world does. When people say to you, "What do you do?" and you say, "Oh, I'm a Qigong teacher," and they look at you like you've sneezed or, what was that word? And then you have to say, and so I've been very cheeky over the years, and I've developed a phrase where I say to people, "Chinese yoga," and they go, "Ah, I get it." And so Chinese yoga, it really is a sort of a shortcut because yoga has become so predominant. And I think there's time for something new. And so Zhejiang Qigong, clearly not, something new. It's been around for a long time, but something new on the high streets of the Western world. And Zhejiang Qigong, why shouldn't it be that? We all know how powerful it is. All the people here on
Right.
the viewers understand that. But yeah, the project as such, we've decided to create a phased kind of version of it. And so, as you said, we got out there. And the thing that brought us to a stop initially, unsurprisingly, was COVID that sort of stopped everything, stopped the whole world. We'd already been to China twice and shot lots of interviews, but we still need much more of a spread around the world. But we looked at the project and thought, if we raise a small amount of money, well, I'm about to say a figure that anybody would be happy with to have in their bank account. If we raise £20,000, and this is the subject of this call, is because we're starting our crowdfunding project. If we could raise £20,000, we can finish this documentary completely. And it won't be the documentary I really, really want it to be, but we can still put an hour's worth of really interesting footage up on YouTube about Zhejiang Qigong, which will be informative and interesting, and we'll have lots of interviews. But there's a bigger project behind this. In fact, there's an even bigger project behind that, and we can go to that in a moment. We have through our various film connections, we have a connection to Twickenham Studios in London, which is a very famous studios where some of the James Bond films were made and various other things, and to a director who has made quite a few documentaries. And so we approached him and we said, what would it look like if we tried to make a really large scale documentary that could go to the big companies like Netflix or Amazon? And so with him, we've created a business plan, which is seeing us raise over £450,000, which is a, a really significant ask. I say it's a significant ask, but I know, I mean, you've got, tens of thousands of subscribers. And if we could ask each one of them for $10 each, then, things would already be starting to happen really well. But yeah, so we have this much, much bigger project, which would see us travel around the globe. So, as many of your viewers will know, there's a huge community of Zhejiang Qigong players in Mexico, for example. I met a young guy called Diego in China this year. And Diego has told me, in fact, we went to the third International Qi Science Conference when we were there in China. And Diego was one of the speakers at this conference. And he announced at the conference that he hopes that by 2030, they will have between 2 to 3 million Zhejiang Qigong practitioners in Mexico alone. And so he has very, very advanced plans. To put that into reality, they think they probably have something between 50 and 100,000 at the moment. And so this is one of the key things that we noticed, of course, is that our trailers are currently both in English and we have subtitles in Spanish now, because there seems to be such a burgeoning Zhejiang community in the south of America as well. And then, of course, we'd like to go to America. We've got a few names that I could mention if you're interested. There are several European countries that we would travel to. Keen to go to Switzerland, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, to interview lots more people there. And then, of course, there are wonderful communities in Malaysia as well, and Australia, New Zealand. So this is quite an extensive tour, especially if we're going to take with us a first-class director and a first-class cameraman and sound person and et cetera, et cetera. So you can imagine how a small budget of 20,000 can be inflated to a budget of
Right.
460,000 when you
Right.
suddenly add to it teams around the world and travel budgets and things like that. So yeah, so it's a lovely idea is that it scales up and it scales down. And whatever we can manage to raise will produce something that will benefit the Sheneng Qigong community.
We have a way you can discover Qigong. So at the Sheneng Qigong Students Hub, we know that understanding Qigong is very important. And also that Sheneng Qigong in itself has various nuances that people can't easily comprehend. So we've approached it in the style of a video game. On this page, Discover Qigong, you can select your character. So you can either be a beginner, a practitioner, or a holistic healer or self-healer. And you click on your character and it takes you to these different sections. In these sections, you can explore the nuances. And when you click on a card, all of the resources pop up, and we've made it really fun, and not many people know about it. So if you are interested, have a look and discover Qigong.
Now, this is something that I really like about your approach. It's a great to dream big, and I think you've got a fair opportunity here to make it big. So let's aim for that. But in any case, you're going to produce something of value.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know whether this is going to be like a low budget production, but that still brings the message across, or a medium sized production, or whether it's going to be a big hit on Amazon or Netflix. We don't know that. But in any case, it's going to be something of value that will support people and will bring new people to the Sheneng Qigong world and have more people benefit from this incredible work that's been done all over the world. So this is what I love about it. So it's not an either it's going to work or it's not going to work. We know it's going to work. We just don't know to what scale we can actually bring that project, right?
Exactly.
Now, when it comes to the content, I'm not sure how much you can share or willing to share or allowed to share. How do you see this happening? So I get that you will visit today's teachers, but how much is it going to go into the past? Are you also going to do some footage about how things used to be, about the Waksha Center, about how the whole thing developed? Are you looking at that as well, or is it more about the recent work of Sheneng Qigong teachers and masters all over the world?
The script as it stands at the moment has an introduction, which is how did I discover Zheneng Qigong and how did I discover Qigong? Because the raison d'etre for me doing Qigong was that I had a very toxic lifestyle. I worked in the city of London, too much drinking, smoking, late nights, stress. Wow, such stress. And I had to find something that was going to save my life effectively. And so I tried yoga, which I found great, but not really what I was looking for at that stage. Studied Tai Chi for 2 years. I really enjoyed that. Again, didn't quite seem to be it. And then when I discovered Qigong, it really felt like I'd come home. It really felt like, I'd finally found my place in the world. And on top of that, it helped me to build up the strength and the reserves to actually leave this toxic job. And I never believed I was going to be able to do it. But with the power of Qigong behind me, I was able to leave the city and instantly drop into a new career, working in computers, actually, as it happens. But all the time that I was working computers, my newfound Qigong story ran alongside that. I started my own classes, then I became a therapist, and somehow, actually, as a strange aside, I found that working and diagnosing computers was very similar to working and diagnosing humans. They have the same kind of tree structure. If you can find out what the problem is, you work your way down to the root cause, and then you can solve it. And so, yeah, that was the bottom line was that the film script starts with the brief description of how Zheneng Qigong saved my life.
Right.
And then we move on to the move away from the sort of generality of Qigong, if you like, to the more specific Zheneng Qigong world. Because the story of the Medicine as Hospital is a really, really powerful one. We have some footage that we've taken from the various films on YouTube, and we have been asking around various other teachers because I know that there was actually a department run by Teacher Gao, who's one of my teachers, who actually made tons and tons of footage. So we're trying to find out how much of that still survives because it'd be lovely to be able to incorporate some of the older footage. Then the next part of the story takes us through to current day teachers, as you say, around the world. And we wish then to spread the interviewing much wider because we have predominantly Chinese people in our current trailer who have made dramatic changes to their lives. And on that trailer, there's one lady who talks about her tumors on her thyroid, which just evaporated over a space of 3 weeks. And we have many other lovely stories like that we picked up in China in our travels. But now we'd like to speak to Western people because there is a tendency for people to think to themselves, oh, this is something that only Chinese people can do. And as we know, it's not, it's something that anybody can do. And so, yeah, so that's the next phase is to then start putting some Western people on tape. And then I think eventually what we really want to do is to move towards the last third of the film, perhaps being about I don't want to say more esoteric and more spiritual, although I think a lot of people see it that way. But for me, there's an aspect of Qigong that meshes perfectly with quantum science. I really like the way that quantum science thinking talks about, the universe and the waves moving to particles and vice versa. And we talk about matter, being turned back into non-matter or being turned into matter. Cancer tumors disappear. And it's exactly the same process that people talk about. When you take the information away from a particle, it turns back into a wave. And so for me, we can look at this on a much more scientific basis. Although we all feel, I think, that there's a very spiritual side to our journey, there's also a very practical side. So I think we'd like to touch into that as well.
I just think it's funny that you start about talking about the more spiritual side and then you move straight to science, because for me, now what we call spiritual science is actually all very, very simple to explain. For me, Zheneng Qigong is not some airy-fairy miracle thing. It is, right. Deep down, it makes total sense. So even the logical mind can understand why Zheneng Qigong works so well. And for me, that is also one of the powerful messages that if I would do a documentary, I would like to get across. So it's not just another, of these movies that promises all kinds of wonders if you just do certain things right. There is actually, that's why they call it Qi science. There are scientific thoughts behind it. They all make total sense if you get down to the basics. Everybody can nod and say, okay, now I get why Zheneng Qigong works so well. And I would love to see that incorporated in a documentary.
I think it's fundamental.
So that is not just for the airy-fairy people, but basically for everyone. And that would be great if you can, if that could be part of what you're doing here.
Yeah, Dr. Pang, his watchwords in this are, it has to be safe, it has to be repeatable, and it has to be easy to learn. And we all know that is, the case with Zheneng Qigong. And so the science that Dr. Pang used in the Medicine as Hospital fascinates me. I don't know if you know the stories about them testing adding qi to structural concrete, and that you can reinforce the strength of structural concrete by 30%. They could increase the yield of rice crops, a certain rice crop, by 42%. And so those are things that are really tangible. Imagine the ability to, almost double the harvest, and how that would help for, world hunger. And rather than asking one of these large pharmaceutical companies or big pharma, if you know what I mean, agricultural companies, just to add some more terrible chemicals to it. Now we're talking about Qigong practitioners helping the harvest. And I think that's a really, really nice idea. So yes, the Qi science is very, very important.
Is that the script, basically? Is that the story?
There's another little bit to it, which is that when we looked at this kind of Western side of things, as it were, and how do we help Western people engage with this more easily, as it does, on the face of it, look like Eastern esoteric, arts. And so from my days at Positive TV, I've made some very, very good connections in the spiritual and science world. And there are quite a few people who are trying to break these kind of boundaries as well. And so many of your viewers will have come across an American guy called Joe Dispenza. He's often found paired up with Greg Braden and Lynn McTaggart, who's a friend of mine as well. And so there are some of these, Bruce Lipton was the other person I was looking for. So we have connections to go to, certainly to Bruce Lipton and to Greg Braden, both of whom are scientists who work in this kind of field and who are talking about energy from a Western perspective. However, what they're talking about perfectly knits with what we know as Zheneng Qigong science. And so what we're hoping to do is to be able to bring those people into the documentary as well and ask them to give their Western perspective on this Eastern art so that we can perhaps simplify it, I suppose, for people and show that it is not something, woo-woo, that actually, it really genuinely can be thought of as science from a Western perspective as well. Unfortunately, Western scientists tend to, well, if it's not chemical based or it's not something you can make a lot of money from, our Western scientist friends tend not to be very assiduous at testing it as such. So very nice to have, much more of a scientific program behind from a Western perspective, as well as the kind of work they're doing in Xi'an, where they're testing the science there. And I believe you were saying Master Liu as well. He's also working from a scientific perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And so you're suggesting here that, the thoughts of the likes of Joe Dispenza or Bruce Lipton or Lynn McTaggart is very much aligned with the fundamental ideas of Zheneng Qigong. Completely. Because, more people know these people and their work than actually know Zheneng Qigong. So this is a great bridge to reach people that already are open to the ideas and the thoughts. Only they might not know, how beneficial the tools are of Zheneng Qigong, because it is a bit as if, what Greg Braden and Joe Dispenza say, and that's wonderful. And here's the toolkit, Zheneng Qigong. Right. Yeah. So here are the exercises you can do. And because that's something that's probably lacking. I mean, I don't know enough about their work, but I would assume that when it comes to actual exercises, Zheneng Qigong has a lot to offer to people that love the ideas of Joe Dispenza.
Torsten, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And I'm treading into sort of delicate territory here when I say, when I bring down the whole of Buddhism with one comment. But I also look at something like Buddhism, where you have nothing but meditation, or many of the styles have nothing but meditation, because there are also Buddhist styles of Qigong, so we have to say that. But, something that's based entirely on the mind. And I think an awful lot of the work that these guys, Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden are doing, again, based on, the mind. And I think it is interesting, because when I first started doing Zheneng Qigong, okay, so just to put the timeline correct on that, I started studying myself 34 years ago, something like that. I only started teaching 25 years ago. I only discovered Zheneng Qigong probably maybe 15 years ago. But yeah, right back at the very beginning, people would say, 50% of all problems are in your mind. And now if you listen to Joe Dispenza talking, he'll say 95% of all problems are in your mind. So, whether that's the case, he certainly says it because it fits his work. I'm not sure. Perhaps, let's say 80% of all problems are in your mind. But that still leaves a very large part of the work that needs to be done on the body. And I don't think those guys address it. So I think that also Zheneng Qigong is perfectly placed to mesh with Western spiritual, Western science, Western medicine. It fits so nicely with all of those things. And the other thing that I like so much about Zheneng is that it doesn't challenge anybody's religion either. So it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Muslim or anything. We don't ask you to believe anything apart from the fact that you can heal yourself, which I don't know, maybe that's a problem, but I don't think so. But I think that that's it. For me, it's an incredibly powerful tool that adds so much to all of these other things. It, augments everybody else's ideas.
I couldn't agree more.
Good.
And in particular, because I also see a tendency in Qineng Qigong these days with a lot of the teachers to shift the focus purely towards consciousness. Now, I don't want to disregard consciousness because, it is the key. And there are ways to get there that can be physical and that can approach the whole consciousness from a different angle, because not everybody is very good at just calming their mind. Some of us are doing quite well if they do a great lift you up and use that as a vehicle to get to that state and to activate the self-healing. So I don't think it's I'm just observing it that even in our world, Qineng Qigong, a lot of focus goes to consciousness, which is great because Qineng Qigong isn't, it's not a sport, right? Where you just go out and do your exercise. It's obviously something very different. But there's a reason why Dr. Pang, did all these exercises. And if you look at the Medicine-less Hospital, the Waksha Center, this is what they did 8 hours a day. They did exercises. So let's get the balance right here. And this is where we can bring something into the world that is quite simple, because the exercises aren't difficult. Everybody can learn them. And we can bring something and add something to the work that other people are doing that is more consciousness based, like Joe Dispenza, for example. No? So that's what I love about Qineng Qigong, because it just gives us one more route to get to where everybody seems to be heading towards.
I agree with you. Yes, I think that in my lifetime, the trend has been moving from the physical to the mental, as it were. And certainly when I started studying, first off, I started studying just standing Qigong with a master called Master Lam. And I used to say to him, why do we do this? And he said, just do it, don't ask questions, And so many Chinese masters, and when I say just do it, don't ask questions, that is about all he ever said to me over the space of about 2 years. Literally all the instruction I ever got. Just do it, don't ask questions. Certainly nobody was talking about consciousness at that stage. And I think that, the sort of spiritual revolution was beginning. I suppose, obviously in the sort of 60s and 70s, we were sort of, I don't know, people were taking LSD and kind of discovering consciousness, but it was still in the sort of the esoteric field. And then by about maybe the 80s and 90s, people were starting to think of this as being more commonplace and being a subject that we could actually start to research as well, that it would have its own field. And that is mirrored entirely in what's happened in Qigong. So to begin with, it was just a physical exercise. And I was told that I was learning it because one day I could turn it into a martial art. I said, okay, fair enough, I'll try that. And it was only in the early 2000s that I discovered medical Qigong. And that's been studied in the universities in China since about the 1970s, 1980s. And I think Dr. Pang was probably part of building medical Qigong. Most Qigong people in China were, or high-level Qigong people were. And so I started studying that as a therapy. And you tend to find then that what has happened is that the many spiritual arms of Qigong in China had their spirituality gently removed from the top, shall we say? Because of course, in China, there's nobody higher than the government, and that's the important part for them. And so a lot of that had been changed, had just been disregarded, let's say. It had become a very, very technical device. And that is the beauty of it, because they were able to look at the exercises and say, this is why this works. This is why this one doesn't work so well. Select an incredible set of exercises. And I have some enormous tome somewhere about this thick that has, all of the different types of exercises that they selected to teach at the universities and why they were good and what they did and so forth. And out of that comes Qineng Qigong. But it's quite clear that Dr. Pang has gone very deeply on his own spiritual journey. And from that, he's evolved these things. And the whole study of consciousness was evolving at the same place. And I suspect that he was pushing it forward as much as anybody. And so now we've moved in my lifetime from this kind of it's only physical to now, as you say, perhaps it's got to it's only mental. And perhaps we have to swing back to the middle, as often happens with these pendulum swings, that we shouldn't forget the physical. But I think that's it. I think in Zhineng Qigong, we have such a lovely balance of both of those things. And if you think back to your starting point, everybody starts, 90% of people start just by doing exercises. It's just bit by bit, you start to think, there's more to this than meets the eye, as your teacher slowly drip feeds some new information in. But yeah, we always start with the physical. So, that's the natural progression for us, for each person. But it also seems a natural progression for Qigong over the years as well.
Right. So I can see there's plenty to put into your documentary.
Gosh, yes.
You might have to turn it into a series at the end of the day. It's not going to be just one movie, but this is a great project, Jeremy. And we from the Zhineng Qigong Students Hub, we will follow you in the next month and years, depending on how long it takes. So we will regularly report on the progress you make, on what's happening, so that our listeners and our viewers and our community is informed about this project, because I think it's something that's close to all of our heart, because everybody's listening here has probably benefited from Zhineng Qigong one way or another. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. So this is a great way of giving back and making it approachable for other people that don't know it yet. So I think this is a course that we can all subscribe to. So we will obviously link your page in the notes, in the show notes here, and we will continue to report about what you're doing. And you said you've started this crowdfunding platform, so you can only encourage people to support this wonderful project. And continue to observe what you're doing and watch what you're doing by staying tuned into what we are saying, reporting here. And the Zhineng Qigong Students Hub in our newsletter, so there will be regular updates about how the documentary is coming along.
Very good. Well, that's it. Yes, we hope, as you say, lots of material. And, it's possible that if somebody like Netflix were to be interested, that we might cut it into 4 or 5 shows. One of the crazy ideas was actually to have a month-long retreat and follow people and to see how they get along and actually film their stories. So, yes, who knows how the project will turn out. And that's my appeal to all the people who have come this far on the podcast with us. If you can find some way to support this documentary, we would really, really appreciate your help. We have an Indiegogo crowdfund. And as you said, Torsten, you're going to link that. That would be amazing. And thank you yourself, Torsten. That's been really good to talk to you as well.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Good luck with the project. And we talk soon to see how far you've come already.
Yeah, we'll send you some good news.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We trust you enjoyed this conversation, and we invite you to subscribe to our podcast so we can stay in touch and notify you of future episodes. We will end today's episode with the 8 verses meditation performed by Zhineng Qigong teacher Katrin Hendricks. Enjoy. To get your free ebook on the 8 Verses meditation, please check the show notes below.